5, 4. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you today here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. If you want to join us here on, let's say, on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, please go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. You can find me there. I am now on Blue Sky at santitajackson.bsky.social, at santitajackson.bsky.social. And I am, on X still at Santita J, the Santita Jackson Show. And you can also reach me, on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page, not to Santita Jackson, because Santita Jackson is a landing page. This is just how Facebook has worked it out. And I get limitations on how many of you I can take on as friends, and I want everybody. So please go to Santita Jackson and Friends, and let's build the family. And we're joined by, let's say, we got you, Dr. Starks. It's good to see you. Stay right there. We're up on the air, and we got Dwight McKee, of course, Dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project. And, of course, family on this show, both of you. Professor Emeritus, Northeastern Illinois University, a renowned civil rights organizer and activist. And we're so glad to have you, Dr. Starks. I wanted to start with Dwight McKee because you know what? I think he's a prophet.
I think so, too. Absolutely.
About 4+ years ago, just about 4 years ago, before the election of 2020, he and Robert Patillo, who has been on this show many, many times, well, they both said something that outraged the audience. A, they did not see Trump losing. And they said, if he does lose, he's not going to leave the office. He's just going to set up a parallel government at Mar-a-Lago. And he will be back if he loses. I think I kind of have it right. But the nuances of it, I need Dwight McKee to explain, because as we are recording this show right now, the 2024 election has just been affirmed, and in a peaceful way. And certainly everyone was anxious about what could happen, what might happen, although history tends not to repeat itself the same way. People were concerned about there being a peaceful transfer of power, but we saw that today, and thankfully. But we also saw something that many of you said would never happen, and it did. Donald Trump is the president once again. All he has to do is be sworn in less than 2 weeks. That's going to happen. So what does all of this mean, everybody? What does all this mean? And Dwight McKee, what did you see? I'll start off this way. Both of my grandmothers have passed on. My grandmother Helen on my father's side, my grandmother Gertrude on my mother's side. My mother has to check on their houses because they kept their houses past death. And so my parents have a home in Washington. And so several times a year she goes to Washington, and then she has to drive down to Virginia, where her mother was living, check on that place. And then she goes down to South Carolina to check on that place. And the great thing about driving through the country, Dr. Starks and Dwight McKee, and taking the train, as opposed to flying, when you fly over.
Exactly.
You don't go through. But when you drive, or when you take the train, you see the deindustrialization of America, and it's heartbreaking. You see places that were once bustling that, quite frankly, are inactive now. You see cities in decline. You see towns in decline. You see a lot of poverty when you start driving through America, when you take the train through America. And if you start driving, you go into the little mini marts, you go into the fast food restaurants, you go into the Cracker Barrels, you go eat, and you hear Main town America, mainstream America, Main Street America, you hear their conversations. You see their bumper stickers on their cars.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear a different conversation than you're hearing on the corporate news.
Exactly.
And so, Dr. Starks, I need you to get right there in your camera. And so we want to
Mm-hmm.
get things steady because,
All right.
people are watching this and I want them to see you.
Okay.
Okay. And, and she said, this was about 3 years ago or so, maybe it was four. And she said, I just wanted to tell you, I'm in between Virginia and South Carolina on my way into North Carolina. I'm stopping to eat. And I want you to know, don't let anyone tell you any different. Trump is strong. I said, really? She said, oh, yeah. She said, I'm seeing the bumper stickers.
Mm-hmm.
I see the billboards. I'm hearing the conversations. Because one of the things that you learn how to do as a Black person in America is shut up and listen so you can get out the room. And I said, okay. She said, let that be your understanding as you wend your way through America, honey. And the data has shown us that more people voted for Trump than will say. So I want to know from you, Dwight, take us back, because you saw something and you said it boldly without apology, and people got upset with you. And you said, look, what did you say? I didn't bring the rain. You're just the what?
I'm just the weatherman. I'm like the cloud. I'm just the weatherman.
You're just reporting on
He said,
reality.
I'm not the cloud, I'm the weatherman, y'all. I'm just trying to say, okay, Dwight, okay, I need you to get steady in that in your camera. Dr. Stark, stay right there.
Gotcha.
Don't touch anything. Okay. Okay, Dwight McKee, Dr. D, as we call you, what did you see then and what are you seeing now? Because everything that you saw then is happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that for a man of power, they assume privilege and control as a birthright.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see the presidency as a position to be obtained. They see the president as a gift from God and an act of God and something that has to be taken away from them because they see power as a reflection of privilege and money and prestige.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very hard for them to feel like they've lost that because they don't feel as if it's something that they earn.
Mm-hmm.
They feel as it's something they deserve. That's who they are. The country was built for them, about them, for the purposes of perpetrating their position and their money and their power. And so it was not that hard to figure out Trump, given his self concept and his self esteem, is how he would react once he tastes the nectar of power, and then somebody took it away from him. It was not shocking to see that he was going to lose, but was not going to leave. You have to explain to him why he's not the president anymore, when everything in heaven and earth has designed it for him to be that. Secondly, you have to understand that he is essentially value free.
Mm-hmm.
That our understanding of democracy is not his understanding of democracy. His understanding is that power is might. And so once he thought that he lost, or once they tried to tell him he had lost, it was a matter of him gathering up the troops and restoring him to where his rightful position.
Mm-hmm.
So he saw himself as doing God a favor And he saw himself as owing it to the American people to be in charge because that's who he is. And that's what they think about themselves. There are a whole group of Americans who feel the same way
Mhm.
about themselves and their right to be in charge and the right to take over and the right to manifest destiny. That is a God given ordained right. And therefore, they luxuriate in guys like Donald Trump because he reflects the best and the worst of who they are and how they see themselves.
Well,
Well, no,
so-
let me ask Dwight McKee this, Dr. Starks, before I go.
uh-huh.
Dwight, no one believed that he was going to. You and Robert Patillo were virtually alone, in believing that he could win in 2020,
Mhm.
and that even if he lost, you said he'll still win because he will come back and win again. What is it that you saw?
I saw a country that was waiting on deliverables that they never uh, got to. I saw a country who was disappointed in it Biden administration and the Democratic administration because they would not exercise the true power that they thought was necessary to maintain the integrity and the position of the country. And so Biden didn't go in and throw the immigrants out. Biden did not make sure that gas stayed down to a minimum by taking over a bomb at Iraq. Biden didn't do the things that they were comfortable about or looking forward to him doing because they feel like they have a certain manifest destiny in the world. And the role of the president is to help maintain and sustain that. So I saw 40 million, 50 million disillusioned people out there who had expectations of their government that never came true.
Mm. Dr. Starks?
Well, Dwight described Christian nationalism precisely. I mean, that was absolute excellent explanation of what Christian nationalism is all about. And I'm upset that in doing the analysis of this election, we have not talked about number one, gerrymandering, number two, the suppression of votes in those southern states, and lastly, Christian nationalism. I think all three of those played into Trump's victory. And it is a manifestation of Christian nationalism because the people who voted for him, most of them, really and truly believe that they have the God given right to run and rule this country as well as the world, in fact. And they had a right to enslave people of African descent. They had a right to uh, commit genocide on the American Aborigines, and they have a right to continue to run the world in the face of all the obstacles that they see. So yeah, I agree. I agree
But
100%.
Dr. King, I mean, Dr. Starks,
Mm-hmm.
President Biden is a self-declared Zionist who's overseeing a genocide. That's what people see.
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
people see that too. I mean, there are things that it's not, to me, it's not even a Republican Democrat thing. And I'm not saying that that's what you're saying. I'm saying this is bigger than
Hmm.
Trump even.
Precisely. Precisely. But it is it's a belief that is rampant in amongst those in the Baptist and evangelistic communities in white America. They actually believe that they have the right given to them by God to be rulers.
But
Am
you
I
know,
right, Dwight?
but
Not just the right, Rob Starks, but the
Mm.
obligation that
obligation.
they'll be doing
Oh,
God a disservice. They'll
I
be
got
doing God a disfavor if they
you.
did not take their rightful place to rule the planet and to
Uh-huh.
take over a land
Mm-hmm.
that He has given them for the purposes of self governance, and that they represent that light on the hill that's New Jerusalem. And so this is not just a right. This is an obligation to
Mm-hmm.
conquer the land
Mm-hmm.
and to put themselves in that posterity in charge.
well, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I think that there's even something else still going on because I just heard Steve Bannon, one of the architects of President Trump's first first presidential campaign. And there was some distance, but people, tooth and tongue may fall out, but people do stay together, you know. And he was saying about the H-1B visas that this is war. That's how he put
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he would be the warrior for white men, black men, Hispanic men, and Americans who were going to be denied jobs and whose wages would be suppressed because of these visas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting that not only have they taken up the working class mantle, Dr. Starks and Dwight McKee, they're taking up that mantle too. And I think that's something that at least 18% of the black men who voted heard. That's something that the overwhelming majority of Latino male, well, Latino is male, that they heard. There's something going on here, and I want to know what it is because Dwight was on point, and people were very angry. They said, really, you think he's going to run a parallel government? He said, oh yeah, and he's coming back. Why
Mm-hmm.
did you think that he had how did you know, Dwight, that he had enough strength to come back?
Um, because he is what they call in the third world a strong man.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about him teaches of him a strong man, of a man in charge. He's a billionaire that can't go broke.
Mm-hmm.
He is an adulterer that can't be chastised by the church.
Mm.
He is a thief that can't be taken to trial or can't be convicted
Right.
and locked up in jail. It's obvious that he is beyond the law, that
Mm-hmm.
he is a strong man. And that's what weak people look for is a strong man to deliver in their behalf. So it's no different than Hitler was in Germany. It's no different than Mao was in China. It's no different than Stalin was in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Or weak people look for a strong man
What's
to
the difference
deliver for
between
them what they think that they deserve, what they do.
what's the difference between him and and other presidents, or is he a continuation? Is he part of a tradition?
Part of a tradition, a little stronger though,
Okay,
because he's so self-made.
Exactly. Exactly. Hmm.
Dr.
But
Starr.
he would be absolutely nothing if it were not for uh, the media, especially social media, and all the other outlets where he's constantly delivers falsification, lies, just outright lies, and where he spews his beliefs onto the stage, whether they're true or not, and people buy them. You know, and of
But but
course,
but first, the corporate media gave him a platform before we had social media. Social media is second
exactly, exactly.
because I can tell you, he he first of all he was one of NBC's biggest stars.
Hmm.
Okay,
On The Apprentice.
well,
Hmm.
I mean, it was so he. Remember, Reagan was America's number one pitchman.
That's right.
I think we've seen this before. We've seen people who are corporate approved,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And quite frankly, they don't let you in on the Democratic or Republican side unless you've been corporate approved.
Hmm.
And for us to talk about all of these billionaires surrounding President Trump now, to me, is a little disingenuous. You have as many billionaires in the Democratic Party. You saw that they're the ones who tossed Biden out.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I'm just trying to look at the overarching theme here. Because many of us are very anxious about the Trump years, and yet we have a war that we can't fund our schools.
True.
But I mean, and we don't, and we're talking about, uh, we've been talking about the migrants, even though now we see like the H-1B visas are the same thing, but they're for people with college degrees. I
Right.
mean, like we're being squeezed by the oligarchs. I mean, before we even get to Trump.
Hmm.
So, my question for you is, um, what do we do now? Now that he's about here, I mean, what's next, Doctor Starks?
Well, I think if this visa program and the deportation of migrants and will what it would do is close down the advocate, those people who advocate farming and mass farm work, because many of those persons who were doing that kind of work are migrants from
Mhm.
South America. Secondly, I think what it would do is cause a fight in the big cities where the majority of the migrants are staying, because many of the mayors and governors are saying they are not going to cooperate with the Trump administration in deporting
Mm.
migrants. So it would be a real problem. Now, I want to ask Dwight this question. When I was growing up, I always understood from my grandmother, my parents, that you pay for what you do wrong. It comes back to haunt you. But the Christian nationalists don't believe that. So
And,
they
and but
think that you can do anything you want to do as long as it's in the name of their belief and that you will not suffer the consequences. So is that basically the way in which Mr. Trump thinks, Dwight and Santita?
are they alone? A lot of people, the powerful, all feel that they can do what they want. They don't
And
think.
not suffer the consequences. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not just the Christian nationalists. It's a lot of folks.
Uh-huh.
Dwight McKee.
Yeah, and you need a transcendent value that holds you accountable for you to deal with consequences. But if your complexion and your patriotism and your geography are your transcendental values, then you do whatever maintains that, and there are no consequences other than you win or you lose.
Okay, okay. All right.
So you need to be able to adjust your life and your purpose to the Bible, as opposed to just the Bible to your life and your purposes.
Well, I mean, but what happens now, Dwight and Doctor Starks? Because a
Mhm.
lot of people are very very anxious,
Yep.
um, about this moment, and the reason I keep bringing up these other issues, Doctor Starks and Dwight McKee, is because we did not have a genocide 4 years ago. Well, not to the extent that we have it now. I mean, the Nakba started 70, almost 80 years ago. and it's been ongoing, quite frankly, in the Middle East with the Palestinian people.
Hmm.
Um, but this, I mean, everything has just exploded in the Middle East, and it's expanding. And this is before we have gotten to Trump. This is before
Hmm.
we before we've gotten to him.
True. True.
Before we've gotten, and he is on a mad spending spree before he gets out the door.
True. True.
I mean, so I'm saying even before we get to Trump, I mean, as we are living in fear of Trump, we're not even looking at what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, because we're in trouble all over the planet. We have problems in Sudan. We have problems in Haiti. Uh, we have problems in Kenya and Nigeria. You name it. People of African descent are in trouble everywhere we can think about on this planet. And people like Donald Trump do not look at those issues and think about how you can solve them. All they want is to continue to take the oil and minerals out of those countries for their own good.
But isn't that what Ukraine is about?
Yes, of course.
So
Yeah.
so I'm saying Trump is a continuation,
Uh-huh.
because I'm trying to speak to the fear that I'm hearing from a lot of people, and that disturbs me. It saddens me to hear and see us so fearful, and it's disturbing that we're not mindful of the dangers that are with us already.
Yeah,
Well,
the
then,
fear is that he's going to put me on the list, and I'll be a victim rather than victorious one. That's the
Well,
fear.
Dwight. Now you finished chewing, and so let me pivot to Doctor Starks. Why? Well, Doctor Starks. I mean, so what do we do? Because we didn't. We tend not to put. I mean, there was 900,000 fewer Democrats voted in New York in 2024, for
mhm,
example.
mhm.
Um, there were
Not
a
as
lot.
many in Chicago, but we had a big drop off, though.
No,
Absolutely.
but I said in the state,
Hmm.
in the state of New York, in the state, not in the city, not in the
Hmm.
five boroughs, but in the state. And and I'm saying, there's some things. At least I'm seeing the Republicans give voice to. They have become the voice of the working class. Now I've got Steve Bannon, and Chappelle said Steve Bannon, she loves him because he is hilarious. He is, and he's waging war on behalf of black folks and Latinos and white folks, because these folks are coming in here and taking your jobs, turning them into indentured servants. I'm not hearing that language from the Democrats. It's like they're missing the mood. They're not reading the room, Dr. Starks.
Oh, no, I agree. We don't need any further uh, unemployment amongst African people, so we don't need anybody coming in and taking those jobs. But here's what disturbs me again about the past election. No one, neither Harris or Trump, talked about poverty. In
Mhm.
fact, you can look at all of every one of the speeches made by both of them. Not one time did they mention poverty. They talk about middle class and
Mhm.
rising to the middle class and maintaining the middle class. So that contributed, in my opinion, to a lot of people, why a lot of people didn't vote, because poor people say, well, they're not concerned about me and my plight. So I think the issue of poverty, which was, the March on Poverty, the anti-poverty uh, crusades were led by Dr. King and uh, Jesse Jackson, etc., is not being addressed. So what do we do about that? How do we deal with that? Dwight, Santita? Am I the only one concerned about that?
No, I mean, but I'm saying we didn't call the Democrats out about that, Dr. Stark.
That is true. That is
And
true.
when we tried to call them out about these things, people said, you're a Trump lover. You don't want Kamala to win. I'm like, I want her to win, and the only way she can win is to inspire the people who feel like they're being overlooked. When I did two shows yesterday, in the comment section, people were lamenting the focus on the elite HBCUs,
Hmm.
on the Divine Nine, on the
Hmm.
Black Greek letter organizations. Comment after comment after comment. When I tried to say, you all, that shouldn't be the focus, I went to Howard. I'm a Delta from Howard. I get it. But there's
An
some
elite
things, but
HBCU.
what, and what I'm not going to do is just stop at the sorority convention.
Hmm.
No, no, because that's not where we live.
Hmm.
That's where some of us live, and that's important. I mean, when Reverend ran for president, he was the second Grand Basileus of the Qs, which is the highest office an undergraduate can hold. He ran against Doug Wilder, by the way. Governor Doug Wilder, they were Qs together as undergrads. He's he's got a bee in his bonnet about that to this day. That having been said, but he didn't stop there. You go to the Progressive Baptist Convention and the National Baptist Convention and to the storefronts and to the Bud Billiken Parade and then you got to go through Appalachia. And you got to go on Joe Rogan's podcast, Dr. Starks.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
Reverend can go to Farm Aid in the 80s, and when he first went on the stage, they booed him. They almost turned
Oh,
that stadium out.
I remember. I remember. Hmm.
By the time he was finished, they were chanting, "Run, Jesse,
Jesse
run,
Run.
and win, Jesse, win." You got to do it.
Hmm.
But that I'm not seeing that. But whenever you told Trump not to go somewhere, he went to the Bronx. The Bronx.
Hmm.
He
Hmm.
went wherever you told. He went to the NABJ. You didn't have to
Yes.
ask him twice. He said, "Boom! I'm stopping everything. I'm going." Did he please
But
everybody there? No, but he was there.
Yeah, he went. He went. Hmm.
but you have to first stop by the cross. There has to be an empathy for your neighbor for it to be on your policy list. And as long as you operating in this me doctrine,
Wait a minute, Dwight. I need you to finish eating.
as long as you operate in this me doctrine, then there's no room at the cross for anybody but you. Is look at the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans are Christian nationalists. The Democrats are Christian personalists.
Okay. Okay.
One is locked into the patriotism of the country with a Christian veneer. The other one is locked in personal self-interest with a Christian veneer.
Hmm.
But there's
Well,
no empathy for your neighbor on either side.
I see. I see. Hmm. Hmm.
Well, so Dr. Starks, I mean, just is there an historical precedent for the time in which we find ourselves?
Not that I can think of right away. No, this is a new era, and I think it's new primarily to social media, the ability of a candidate or a personal people can do personal speeches around the world in the snap of a finger. That's new to the world, and it's happening in in many countries. Look what's happened in Venezuela. Look what's
Mhm.
happening in Germany. Look what's happening in most of the countries around Europe. Today, Trudeau said he was leaving. He's he's leaving his office as prime minister
Mhm.
and leader of his party because he has he's losing uh, uh, voice in his community in Canada. So the problem I have is what how do we get out of this? How do
Mm.
we how do we make sure that we have no longer homeless people living in tents and under viaducts in our cities? That concerns me.
Hmm.
Uh, it concerns me that we're not going to have a Republican presidency that is going to try and deport at least 80,000, 80, maybe 80 million uh, people and deny many others from coming into the country. And we have to also understand that some of those people are of African descent.
Well, I mean, you got people coming from everywhere. I mean, and mind you,
Exactly,
it's not.
exactly.
I mean, I'm concerned obviously about black people, but I'm
Of
concerned about
course, that's my
everybody.
major concern, right?
Well, no, my concern is we are destabilizing the whole world. So
Mm-hmm.
our borders are open to they're porous. I mean, because during Hurricane Katrina, the Department of Labor relaxed their rules so that they could bring in people from South and Central America. People who, by the way, who are indigenous to this, to the,
Mm-hmm.
they just speak the languages of their language of their conquerors, Spanish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I hear you, but respectfully, as I mean, obviously, I'm black. I'm concerned about black people, but I'm concerned about everybody because the fact is, we're all breathing the same air, and we're laboring under the same system that is pushing Venezuelans out of Venezuela so we can go and take their oil.
Right,
That is
exactly,
pushing Libya out of Libyans so we can take their oil.
exactly,
That is
exactly.
trying to take the Panama Canal back from the Panamanians.
Precisely.
I
Hmm.
mean, we can just keep on going with it. It
Keep on
doesn't
going.
stop. It
Absolutely.
doesn't stop. And then I have some leaders who are indigenous to their areas who don't help because they get bought out.
Hmm. Hmm.
So so I'm like, I mean, I'm hearing you, but and then I've got a party that I am a Democrat that have been said they don't talk about poverty and when you challenge them on it, many of us will say you're being disloyal. I'm like, look, I'm not a lapdog. Not to mention the fact that part of the challenge that we had was that you had a man who said he would be the transitional president, Dr. Starks and Dwight, which
Hmm.
meant he was going to serve 4 years.
Hmm.
He wouldn't move. Then his team put out awful rumors about Vice President Harris,
Hmm.
tearing away her credibility. So it made it even harder for her to run in 3 months.
True.
I mean, goodness gracious. So while we're looking at, we have made Trump the demon, we got some demons over here. And I'm just saying, how what are we going to what are we going to get out of this now? Because I mean, I'm saying Dwight and Dr. Starks, do we have any negotiating room? Because our HBCUs, the land grant colleges are owed at least between 15 and 16 billion dollars. They need that money. I
And
mean,
many of the states are refusing to fund HBCUs, whether.
and they're owed they're owed between 15 and 16
Hmm.
billion dollars.
Hmm.
I'm saying, do we have any room at this time to negotiate for that? I mean, because we don't have 4 years to wait. We can't wait. Dwight, Dr. Starks.
Well, we have to look to our leadership, our African American leadership, to wage that fight. As well as the rest of us joining and supporting that leadership in that fight. But it is a fight, and it's not going to be over in 2 days. It's going to be over if it gets if we get out of it. It's going to be years, and we need strong, intelligent leadership to fight our fight at every level. And at the moment, we don't have that kind of leadership.
Well, but I think that just not talking to him and just talking about him is not going to help us.
I
And we
agree.
need an uncompromised leadership for stars.
I agree. I
We
agree.
need leadership that understands that power has to be negotiated from a level of power.
Mm.
White people understand it. Martians understand that. The first thing they say when they get to Earth is, what? Take me to your leader. Because they know
Hmm.
that's where the negotiation has to start.
Hmm.
Exactly.
But with
Exactly.
with with our leadership, we're so compromised by party that we see talking to the opposition as talking to the enemy. And that we see it as a sellout rather than a compromise or negotiation.
Hmm.
And so our thinking changes and we understand that neither one of these parties are fundamentally representing our interest,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and learn how to negotiate and fight with the party that has the power and has the resources, then we'll always be on this tricky.
Hmm.
Because what happened is we don't negotiate with the opposition. Then when our team gets in, they see no reason to negotiate with us because
Precisely.
they already see us as part of the party uh, platform.
And they have us in their pockets. They just you know, take for instance, uh, uh, the Democrats, take African American vote for granted. I mean, you don't have to worry about those black folks in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles, etc. They are going to vote for me regardless. So you don't even have to worry about them. You go to other areas. So I agree with you, Dwight. That's exactly what's happening.
But Dr. Stark, see, this is what happened. We all know Cleo Fields, Congressman-elect Cleo Fields, who
Hmm.
we met 40 years ago when he was the president of the student government at Southern University.
Hmm.
Came from the most humble of beginnings, but when he heard that Reverend Jesse Jackson was going to run for president, he and his friend scraped their money together and flew to Washington when they
Hmm.
were in college so that they could witness and make sure that they were on ground level so they could go back and register people to vote. And they did. Reverend really swept the South the first time in 84.
Hmm.
He absolutely swept it 4 years later. Part of that because of the efforts of a Cleo Fields, who then at 21 became a state senator.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, in college. And then he became the congressman from that area, the first black person to become the congressman from that area since Reconstruction. And then the Landrews gerrymandered him out, but now he's back. Do you know that? And my point is, he's a proven vote getter
Hmm.
over several decades. Do you know that the Democratic Party did not offer him a thin dime to run?
Well, again, they take us for granted, and we say absolutely nothing about it. We just okay and move on and continue to vote Democratic for Democratic candidates. That's right.
But we don't demand anything. And
It's
let me say,
precisely the point. Hmm.
that was, I mean, I know in Reverend Jackson's era, he was demanding. It drove them. They didn't like it. It didn't drive them crazy. They didn't like it because he didn't just run for president. He was negotiating for people to get for black folks and women and Latinos and Arabs to get contracts with the party. Because
Precisely.
politics is a business, everybody. So the
Hmm.
people who sell buttons are they're getting contracts from the party. People who sell the mugs, the T-shirts, the hats, all of that. Yeah, contracts. The food at the events, contracts. Reverend was pushing for that. He was also. I remember we were in California at. We had gone right after the campaign was winding down. At least that phase of the campaign was winding down. We were having dinner with Ted Koppel and Rick Kaplan, who was his executive producer, went on to become the president of CNN. And we were sitting with Ron Brown. Oh my Lord, look at these people. And my father was challenging them. He said, "Hey, you got one of the top shows on television. How many people are on your staff, Ted?
Hmm.
How many black people are in the news division, Ted? Rick?" Okay, my point. And he called Gwen Eiffel, who was covering the campaign. He called her over to the table. He said, "She's one of the most brilliant journalists out here. Is she on your radar?" That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, not only that, talk about the fact that your father saved Oprah Winfrey.
Well,
And where,
yeah, I mean, well, absolutely, but I mean, I'm just saying, even like Dwight said, we've got to have uncompromised black
hmm
leadership.
hmm
But that having been said, we also cannot be afraid in the Trump years. I,
precisely.
because I think we're talking up a lot of fear, and that is something that, to me, that's not the way to go, Dr. Starks,
Right. Well,
because you know that's not the way to go. I don't
well,
think.
I'm also concerned about our young people. Are we going to really do something to awaken our young people, bring them into leadership, so that we can get out of this mess? I mean, now we have African American males committing suicide. And when you were in high school and grammar school, there was no such thing as African Americans under the age of 18 uh, committing suicide. But that's now a problem. So what do we do about that? The white
Well, we
Santita?
have to ask Dwight because he's working with these young people as the dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project. Dwight McKee, I only have about 5 minutes here.
So Dwight, tell me. I mean, mental health is a problem in our young people as well as our old people, but it's particularly apparent amongst our young people.
So the question is, Robert,
hmm
the question is, what's the question?
What do we do about the lack of mental health amongst our young people?
Well, we have to look at what held our parents and grandparents together, who second generation out of slavery,
hmm
many of them suffering Jim Crow,
hmm
many of them impoverished,
hmm
is they operated with a value system that transcended themselves.
Mm.
They saw hope in a God
hmm
that looked high, set high and looked low, that
hmm
made some promises to them that they could cling to and hold on to and could take them from Sunday to Sunday. And in that, they could negotiate themselves a decent enough life that somewhere between family, wives and children, best friends, pastors, a sermon every week, the right song, and the chicken dinner sustain them through the worst of times. Our children are trying to make it on their own. They're operating with no anchor. And so what happens when a boat operates with no anchor is as soon as any wind comes, that boat crashes.
hmm
And so we have to reattach our children to the values that sustain our mothers and our grandfathers in the worst of times.
But
Well, you
the
all,
what?
I literally have 2.5 minutes. I want to get a closing thought from each of you, and everyone, stay tuned. We've got yet another hour to go on the other side, but I just thank you, the brilliant Dr. Robert Starks, and all of the service that you've given us down through the years, and Dwight McKee for all of the service and the brilliance that you both have shared with us down through the years, because we can get through this moment. I know that we can. 1 minute for you, Dr. Starks.
Yeah, I just want to say that thank you for having me on the show, and it's great to be with Dwight McGee, who was brilliant and always can give us a good prediction as to what is going to happen. But lastly, I would say if we don't do something to bring our young people back to where the right was right, our ancestors had even worse times, but they made it through. Young people don't go to church anymore, so you can't depend on the church to help us in this regard. But what we need to have as top of our list, how do we associate with young people and bring them out of the mental health problems that they're having, as well as strong Black leadership to help us get out of this mess.
Dwight McKee, 1 minute.
I totally agree with Stars. We
Mhm.
actually have on the 18th of January at Push a symposium of some of the top scholars in the country who will be
Mhm.
raising that issue. What do we teach our children to try
Mhm.
to realign them with those values
Mhm.
and give them a sense of worthiness and worth that would help sustain them through this times of chaos that they can find themselves in.
And
We have to go back. We have to leave BET and go back to BTU.
amen to that. And we have to think about this because this is something that's not unique to us.
No,
It turns out that Korea has one of the highest rates of the size of suicide of youth in the world.
I didn't know that. That's
In the
interesting.
world, in the world. Well, we're in trouble. We're
Hmm.
world in trouble. And the thing is, I'll tell you what Reverend Dr. Otis Moss Jr., Reverend Otis Moss the third's father said. He said, one thing that he said, I've seen it in your father. He exemplifies the best in our people, and that is our genius, our collective genius for survival.
Hmm. Hmm.
Think about that, everybody.
Hmm.
We have a genius for survival, and we will not only survive this moment, but I want you to know that this is not just a moment. Don't fear anyone. I told Dr. Starks and Dwight McKee, one of my mother's dear, dear friends, Mrs. Juanita Passmore, said, let no one, let nothing have power over you but God. This
Okay.
is not this is not a moment we should fear. This is a moment where we need to work. So let's get busy, everybody. In the words of the brilliant Arsenio Hall, let's get busy. Let's get to work. AM,
Thank you.
AM,
Thank you. Thank you.
Take
blessings,
care,
AM
Bob.
950 Radio,
Take care.
the voice of progressive Minnesota. Back in just a moment.
Okay.